This is your daily dose of all things royal.
This law, that if it passes, which I think it probably will, is terrifying. It will tell people or force the news, no matter whether they like it or not, from the BBC, perhaps Channel 4 or other broadcasters, to the top of their feeds, based on what the government likes. What do we make of that?
Well, it's not a law yet. It's a proposal for a consultation in very, typical British fashion, where they talk about something for 2 years before they actually do anything concrete. But I think what it is exactly that. There's limited eyeball space on mainstream social media. There's a problem in that the British traditional broadcasters offer lots of content online for free, including the BBC. But the problem is it's as boring as watching paint dry. I was looking at the BBC One schedule this morning, and part of their prime morning coverage was the Irish food tour, talking about Northern Irish digestive biscuits, which is fascinating stuff. And I think I'd rather go have teeth pulled than watch it. So basically, it's a competitive issue. And so what the British government's going to try to do, it seems, is rent space for free on channels like YouTube or Meta or X or other things, and force those platforms, which are based in the United States, to give prominence to state-funded or state-regulated broadcasters like Channel 4, Channel 5, ITV, BBC, all that jazz, because they're losing in the marketplace of ideas, because they're not producing compelling long-form content. And even if you look at BBC One's content from today, if you tally up how much original news content they're doing, and I have the schedule right in front of me for your viewers, it's 20 minutes of original news content. And your program alone, for example, will cover this very important topic much more comprehensively than that will. And there are loads of independent creators on YouTube who are going to cover this topic much more comprehensively than the Beeb will. But if, for example, this proposal became law, basically it would say that you have to give priority to the short form news content sponsored by the state rather than the in-depth content which is being produced by individuals.
So over the last 24 hours, YouTube had sent this notice out to all UK creators on the platform. Now, my spidey senses are telling me that this is all for show in what YouTube is doing, making it look like they are a beacon of free speech and acting as if they are on the side of supporting content creators. UK YouTube content creator Winston Marshall is echoing the same sentiment. He writes, YouTube sharing the UK government plans to target alternative media with its channel hosts, like me, suggests that they oppose the plans. It's not for free speech reasons, then at least they foresee how it will hurt their revenues in a serious way. I have good reason to believe that specific videos of ours have been throttled over the last 2 years, so it's going to take a lot to persuade me YouTube are suddenly anti-censorship out of principle. So I write back and I say, you are correct. YouTube has been doing it as they've done it with my channel. UK Prince Harry was behind our censorship and suppression. And we're seeing all of this outrage by not only content creators, but also by politicians in the UK, like Nigel Farage. I think the one thing that everybody is failing to understand is how this came to be. It's not just overnight. The UK government decided to contact Google and say, hey, we're going to be putting in these laws and you're going to have to abide by it. And now, YouTube's up in arms because, we're going to stomp on people's free speech and marketplace of ideas. I believe that this is more of a cover your ass exercise because the Trump administration, one of its priorities from day one when Donald Trump got inaugurated was to protect free speech. Lucky for all of you, if you've been paying attention and following what I've been reporting on, YouTube was exposed for colluding with the Biden regime in censoring disfavored views. Now, if you've been following me for a while, then none of this should be any kind of surprise. And you may recall that I did expose the YouTube files where YouTube was caught red-handed for colluding with not only the Biden regime, but with other groups in suppressing narratives that didn't go with the official narrative that these governments or these various powerful globalists wanted people indoctrinated with, whether it be around climate change or racism or even Meghan Markle's moon bump. For a time, many channels were demonetized if they dared to address and call out that Meghan Markle is a liar. But here we are. And now we're jumping in on this, and I feel like all of this is just for show because the collusion with governments has not stopped. The collusion with the United States might have stopped, but It didn't stop collusion with Australia and following their stupid laws, and then the UK working with Google and YouTube to follow their stupid law, as well as with Canada. And notice that all of these countries are part of King Charles's realm, where his son is here in the United States who had been undermining our U.S. Constitution. And now Americans are pissed off with seeing the news today of what the UK is trying to do or in process of putting into place. I think it's comical that the UK government is, putting out this consultation for the public to give their opinion about whether or not the UK should mandate that these platforms put state-controlled media propaganda outlets as the preferred news outlets that UK citizens, and hopefully not the rest of the world, should be watching and should be looking at while suppressing independent content creators, which subsequently would cover the royal family. When I look at this now, YouTube just deranked anti-Meghan Markle channels from search results and recommendations. It wasn't just Meghan and Harry who were behind doing this. When you look at all of this that has unfolded, Harry and Meghan do not have the power alone to tell YouTube to pull voices down. They just don't have that kind of power, but the palace does, and in fact, they were doing it back in 2019 when Harry and Meghan had been working still for the crown. When you look back at the targeted campaign against many of us, the three people that they chose to make examples of were all from the UK. Because guess what? They know very well what they were doing was violating American civil rights. So they couldn't put someone like me or Duchess of Sussex, Sue Smith, as well as Daily Empress as the face of the targeted campaign to fight mis and disinformation for the overall picture. So what did they use? They used three British citizens who they know can't do anything because there's no law in place to protect their rights to free speech. And they want us all to believe that King Charles had no idea or had any type of clue as to what Harry and Meghan were really doing over here? Come on. The one thing that we don't talk enough about is King Charles hiring this constitutional law expert as his deputy private secretary. Now, what are some reasons as to why King Charles would choose someone like this to be around him? Well, at the time when he hired him on, obviously he was taking over a new role and he definitely needed constitutional advice around being politically neutral, as well as royal prerogatives, relationships with parliament, government. There's a lot of protocol that goes on. But given the fact that King Charles had been preparing for this role his whole entire life, it's hard to believe that he would need this kind of expert to show him the ropes of his own government. According to this Telegraph article, a guy like this would come in handy for Charles for any potential incendiary matters involving Harry and Meghan. Hypothetically speaking, and also quite convenient, that this would be the guy King Charles would need to turn to should Harry's seditious activities triggered UK-US diplomatic friction, as well as any type of human rights claims that were coming from Americans whose First Amendment rights were violated. So for all those that think that the royal family had no idea what these two clowns were coming over here to do, I would reconsider that. You better believe that King Charles and William, too, are all on board with this censorship. And before you roll your eyes at me saying that the royal family supports censorship, well, what do you think it is called when the royal family has control over the media and what is said about them? You don't think that they wouldn't want to have control over the algorithms in the online space? These laws that the UK wants to now impose here on these social media platforms to prioritize propaganda outlets like the BBC, like ITV. You saw what they did with Channel 5 and all of those documentaries about Harry and Meghan. The reason why it's not sticking is because they're not getting the viewership or audiences anymore, because the audience is over here. And when you have voices like mine, it makes those documentaries unwatchable. Like, haven't you noticed you see a lot of these so-called royal reporters now coming over into this space? It's because nobody is buying the shit that they are putting out there in the mainstream media. But by coming over here, their goal is to capture back that audience. This is what this whole exercise is about. You can look at Harry and Meghan as the metaphor for the globalist, corrupt system that have been lying to us for decades. And here we are with the UK government trying to mandate an American company to prioritize state-controlled media on the top of UK citizens' feeds, telling them what they are allowed to watch and prioritize recommended content approved by the state. It is my opinion, based off of the track record the UK has, these laws are going to be put in place regardless of what the public opinion is in this consultation. Now, the reason why we all have to be concerned about this is because it's going to affect everybody. And just think, if the UK succeeds with this, guess who's next to follow? Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and all of Europe. And that's because, if you haven't noticed, all of King Charles's realms have been rocking to the same playbook. And by now, you should all recognize that it's not an accident. And the reason why I have this screenshot up here is to make the point that this is the kind of news outlet the UK government wants to prioritize in your feed. Can anybody tell me why Harry going to the UK without Meghan Markle is breaking news? Like, how is this supposed to be a serious news outlet being shoved in people's faces when there's more serious things going on in the country? Lauren the Insider, excellent commentator here on this platform, posted this yesterday, and it made me sad because in the midst of celebrating this great country and being grateful to be an American, when you see posts like this, it makes you realize that not everybody is allowed to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Lauren writes, America versus England. Seeing our American friends full of hope, pride, and joy for their wonderful country today shows us all how far the UK has fallen. Children in America are encouraged to strive for the American dream. Patriotism is quite rightly encouraged and celebrated. Meanwhile, in England, it's illegal to put our flag on a lamppost. Our MPs have covered up the mass rape of children, and we are being invaded by unvetted male migrants. If you're a white Christian in the UK, you are branded far right, and people like Lucy Connolly are jailed for a tweet. Common sense, Christian values, and hurty words are all a crime in what is fast becoming North Korea Mark II. America, we need your prayers and hope now. It could well be too late for us. Don't let political Islam destroy you like it has us and Europe. I don't care what anybody says. In my opinion, this king is not a Christian. And what I mean by him saying that he's not a Christian is that he's not a practicing Christian. In going back to King Charles's letter to America, as we discussed yesterday, I said on the surface, this letter comes across as well-meaning. But when we look deeper into this, you realize that these words are empty and hollow. It's my opinion, but if Charles was really a practicing Christian, rooted in those Christian principles, he would not have left God out of all of the shared commonalities that we have together with the UK. This globalist agenda is driving and pushing communism.
Across the generations, Americans have fought, bled, and died, not just to secure those rights, but to expand them to citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. Because we are one people, we are one family. You showed that tonight with one flag. And as our Declaration of Independence tells us, we are all made in the image of one Almighty God. And a communist will never say that. That's for sure.
Unlike Charles and the rest of these globalist demons, this country puts God as its foundation above all else. When you remove God, this is what you get. You get the worst of the worst who hate everything that America stands for. You see these two anti-American, anti-West assholes? They belong to the cancer that has crept into this country as well as taking over and conquering the West. Meghan Markle can't make it any more clear that she is anti-American and hates America. In our milestone birthday, 250 years of independence and being proud of being an American, this woman couldn't be bothered. All of that patriotism and all of that success and winning really must be eating these two up inside. That's why you have to recognize that what these two had been doing here since 2020 has threatened this country. And this is why for the last 5 years, I have been relentless exposing this, because you see what these communists are doing now in the UK. This is an agenda that King Charles is fully on board with. You see, if the UK gets their way, voices like Lauren will never be heard. And that's the intended goal for all of this.
So let's go back for a moment to Abraham Lincoln's economic advisor and one of the champions of the American system, Henry Carey. In a work called The Harmony of Interests, Carey said that there are two systems before the world. One looks to pauperism, ignorance, depopulation, and barbarism. The other to increasing wealth, comfort, intelligence, combination of action, and civilization. One looks toward universal war, the other to universal peace. One is the English system, the other we may be proud to call the American system. Now, let Carey's words sink in. One system produces wealth, intelligence, and civilization. The other produces pauperism, ignorance, and war. That is not ancient history. Pauperism, depopulation, and war describe the policies of today's World Economic Forum. But our side of the fight, and the American economic principles which will allow us to prevail, have been suppressed for 125 years. Now, Carey wrote The Harmony of Interests in 1851. At that time, Karl Marx was living in poverty and obscurity in London. It was only later that his London sponsors spread the idea that the essential conflict was between communism and capitalism. Losing the knowledge of the American system is key to understanding the last 125 years of wars and economic downturns. Because the British didn't just assassinate McKinley. They assassinated the very idea of the American system because they knew if our nation or other nations pursued those principles, they would become strong, prosperous, and peaceful, and the empire would be left in the dust. So they stripped us of the principles and gave us sterile or destructive ideas like free trade and laissez-faire, and gave us imperial institutions like the Federal Reserve. And then they told us that's how economies work.
When it comes to Britain, of course, is the number one warmonger of all. Britain still lives in the dreamland of the British Empire, and it wants to escalate at all times. I would advise Britain, why don't you focus on keeping your national health service from collapsing rather than going to war with Russia? But they're not asking me, they're not listening, but that's the advice I would give.
At this point, I think all of us that are seeing this will they, won't they circus is all by design. It's to keep people dumb and stupid. I also think, and I'll leave you on this note, that the reason why we see all of this propaganda constantly saturating the media nonstop about Harry and Meghan is because they are trying to desperately suppress and erase, to a certain extent, what they were doing back in 2020, 2021, and 2022. If you weren't paying attention and you're now jumping in on this, you wouldn't know that Harry and Meghan were launching a disinformation campaign onto unsuspecting innocent people. Again, I go back to the point that I made the other day about there are certain narratives that the media chooses to double down on, but there's others that they choose not to touch, like how Harry knew about January 6th. You know, ever since Trump got into office, I think many of you can agree that we're witnessing this slow rewriting of history. There's barely any mention of the political activism that these two had been involved in, as well as like the Archwell website has been completely wiped. And I don't think many people are connecting the dots here and understanding what we are witnessing with all of this chaos from Harry and Meghan. This is all part of the cleanup. The more garbage that they continue to keep putting out of nonsense suppresses all the other stuff that they have been doing that they don't want people looking at now. The thing that's worrisome here, though, is that if indeed the UK does put this law into place mandating that these state-controlled media outlets be prioritized and recommended, then independent voices like mine will be suppressed even further. I mean, as is, we know that this channel has been suppressed, but if this law gets put into place, then the royal family also will be in control of that. We know that they're in control of what the BBC puts out about them. Same thing for ITV. It's not going to be any different once they move over to the social media platforms, which is what I find extremely concerning.
Guys, our president just said something unbelievable.
All communists are godless. They don't believe in God. And instead of speaking about Christ, we're speaking about yet another threat to the foundations of America. These ruthless communists will attack all religions, but in particular Christianity.
I am so proud to have a president in my lifetime who goes up and speaks about Christ. who speaks about Christianity, who talks about how the churches are filling up. It's such an amazing thing to see. We need somebody in leadership, and it's the president of our country that's backing America as a Christian nation.
Yeah, to all my British viewers, I hope you recognize that this is what Charles is failing to do. Anyway, I don't see any way out of this for the UK people. I do think that the United States is going to have to step in. This is an American company, and we really do need to put our foot down. What do you guys think? Definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.